Well, here's the claim to fame. Lincoln Cemetery, established in 1934, resting place of Charlie Bird Parker. So I actually had to come across a barrier because the entire cemetery is closed. It's Sunday afternoon, closed a little bit early, and looks like I'm the only one in this whole cemetery. But I can clearly see that the grave is marked up here with the sign. Charlie Parker, one of the greatest jazz musicians in American history. You can see there's a saxophone and a bird on top. His nickname was Bird. Charles Parker, August 29th, 1920 to March 12th, 1955. He had a very unfortunate childhood. By the time that he was 9, his father had left. He was an alcoholic, and he was later murdered, which left him to the care of his mother, Addie Parker. She was a nurse from 1891 to 1967. Like a lot of kids growing up without a father, he got in trouble. He hung up with the wrong kids. By the time he was 15, he was injecting heroin in his veins. He really didn't have a good chance in life to lead a straight and narrow life. Born in 1920 in Kansas City, Kansas, Charlie Parker grew up just across the river in Kansas City, Missouri. At age 12, he was playing in the high school marching band and in local dance halls where he first heard the new sounds of jazz. Hanging around the Kansas City clubs, the young Parker went to hear every new musician to pass through, including Jimmy Dorsey, Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, Ben Webster, and Louis Armstrong. He began his career playing alto sax as well as clarinet, which he hated playing and refused to play when he became prominent, for various bands in his native Kansas City during the late 1930s and early 1940s. The chief group that he played for was led by pianist Jay McShann. So here's an interesting story about how he got the nickname of Bird. The band had an engagement in Lincoln, Nebraska, and they all were on a bus. McShann's bus was headed to Lincoln, and on the way, a chicken ran out in the road, and the bus hit and killed it, and Charlie got up and said, "Hey, turn around and go back and get that yard bird." His intent was to have it for dinner, and everybody thought that was so hilarious that they decided to nickname him Bird Parker from that point on. So that's how he got his nickname. In 1942, he decided to seek greater success in the larger New York City market, leaving behind his Kansas City wife, whom he never legally divorced. Parker's first job in New York City was as a dishwasher in a restaurant where the legendary pianist Art Tatum played, influencing Parker to move from the cliché-ridden head arrangement forms of the Kansas City swing style to a more virtuosic mode. By the end of 1942, he had a regular position with jazz great Earl Fatha Hines, and in 1943 he joined Billy Eckstine's popular band. It was during this period, while working with trumpet player and bandmate Dizzy Gillespie, and perhaps not coincidentally doing no recording because of the musician union strike, that Parker, Gillespie, and other musicians began to carve out the signature features of the new jazz style that would come to be known as bebop. Perhaps the most defining characteristic of the new style of jazz that he played was the expansion of jazz harmony away from basic triads to more expanded forms using the upper extensions of chords. And among the best known of his recordings were his own composition of Coco and the Dizzy Gillespie piece A Night in Tunisia, as well as ballads Embrace You, Parker's Mood, and Lover Man. Though his work was generally held in high regard by fans of jazz and fellow musicians, his commercial appeal was limited by the complexity of his work, which the average listener had a hard time following. And I listened to it in preparation for this grave visit, and I gotta say, it is kind of hard to follow sometimes.
Here they are. This is Charlie Parker and the famous Dizzy Gillespie. So, Charlie, I want to award you now the Downbeat Award for the best alto sax man of 1951. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Well, let's put it like this. No, I had no idea that it was that much different. My first conception, man, that's the way I thought it should go. And I still do. I mean, of course, it could stand much improvement. I mean, ever since I've ever heard music, I thought it should be very clean, very precise, as clean as possible anyway, you know. And more or less to the people, you know, something they could understand, something that was beautiful, you know.
So also limiting his success was his growing unreliability caused by his heroin addiction. In 1946, the drugs caused him to have a psychotic breakdown, and he was hospitalized in Camarillo State Hospital in California for about 6 months. Impresarios became reluctant to use him, and he suffered the dubious distinction of being the unqualified living legend who had difficulty getting work, and he was often reduced to playing on a cheap plastic saxophone, albeit often to great effect. In 1954, while working again in California, Parker learned of the death of his 2-year-old daughter and was devastated, which only sent him further into decline. He was separated from his then common-law wife, Chan Parker, and was reduced to playing in dives. He was addicted to cheap red wine, which aggravated his stomach ulcers, and he even once attempted suicide. On March 12, 1955, while visiting his friend, the jazz baroness Nicodé Konigswarter, Charlie Parker died in New York City. The coroner cited pneumonia as the cause of death and estimated that Parker was 55 or 60 years old. He was only 34. Because most of the Midwest and South was segregated at the time, he was buried here in this black cemetery over the objections of Chan Parker. Have you ever been to this grave in Kansas City, Missouri? Now, ironically, this is an all-black cemetery. It's just kind of strange. You think about how America has changed since the 1950s, when blacks and whites were still being segregated, even in death. It's kind of tragic if you think about it. But that's the way it was. That's history, and that's probably one of the uglier parts of our history. So I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode of History Hunters on our tribute to Charlie Parker, the jazz great. Please give us a thumbs up. Let us know what you thought of this video. Thank you so much.
Gracias.